In the classic children's book, Alice in Wonderland, I knew somebody would like it. You can read all about it in the Dallas Morning News this morning, I think. It's what Ronnie says, and Ronnie would never lie to me. Right, Ronnie? See? Alice is wandering, and she comes to a fork in the road. And she meets the Cheshire Cat there. And she says to him, "Would you please tell me which way I ought to go?" "That depends a good deal," the Cheshire Cat replied, "on where you want to get to." "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go." And she's right. You see, if you don't want to go anywhere in particular, it really doesn't matter which way you go. Now, one of my favorite things to do, as I said last week, is to get in my car and to drive, to see what's out there to be seen, and to experience some new things. But if I have to be somewhere in particular, I don't ever want to take the scenic route unless I have time. You know about shortcuts and scenic routes. They almost always take longer, and you're frustrated with what you've seen. It's true. Sometimes in the church, we act like the story from Alice in Wonderland. Sometimes in the church, we're not exactly sure where we're going or what we're doing, and quite frankly, at that point, it doesn't really matter which route we take to get there. But when we have a direction, when we have a goal, when we have an idea of who God has called us to be and what God has called us to do, then the path we take really does matter. And if we're really going to be daring greatly in this day and age, if we're really going to be taking some risk for reaching people for Jesus, if we're really going to be talking about God's love and exhibiting God's love to the world around us, then how we do it is really going to matter. You see, the Scripture is full of the image of the path, the road, the way. It's so full that finally Jesus has to tell his disciples, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father but by me." Because there was lots of competition in Jesus' day. How do we get to God? There's lots of debate over how one gets there. But for the Christian, there's but really one way. And so if we're really going to dare greatly for Jesus, for the way, what path are we going to take? We're coming, I think, close to that fork in the road where we're going to have to decide who we're going to be and how we're going to live. How are we going to touch people's lives for Jesus, and how are we going to share the good news with our world? You see, if there are multiple ways, if there are lots of options, choosing the path, the best path, is really important. Let me tell you one short story about choosing a path. When I was probably a junior or a sophomore in high school, our family went camping. My older brother, my two younger sisters, and my grandparents. And we loved to go camping. And you've heard me talk. We went to Wallowa Lake State Park, one of the most beautiful places in all the world, and none of you have ever been there. If you need a place to go, let me know. But you can't get there from here. You have to go other places first. We were there, and Wallowa Lake is where I spent a lot of my time growing up. I did my 50-mile hike in the Wallowa Mountains as a Boy Scout. I climbed my first mountain in the Wallowa Mountains. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who formed a lot of who I am as a pastor and as a Christian and as a young man. Not so young anymore. What can I say? So we woke up and we were going to hike up to Aneroid Lake, which is about a 7-mile hike. We were going to go fishing in the lake, and then we were going to come down by a different path around over on Mount Joseph. So we were kind of making this big circle. So we went up and we got up to the lake, and we caught our limit in rainbow trout. Each one of us caught 10. It was wonderful. We were feeding a bunch of people, so we decided it was time to head home. And so off we went on the trail that was going to take us down through the mountains and around and down Mount Joseph, which had lots of trees and brush and crags and places to get, lost. Now the good news is we got to the point on Mount Joseph where we could see the campground. It was right down there. It was right down there. You could see it. The only problem was you looked at the path, and to get there, you had to go way over here, and then you went down, and you went way over here, and you went back. You all know about hiking in the mountains, right? To get places, you do cutbacks, and you do like this because it's not very smart just to go straight, right? So my brother and I were complaining about this long hike we're carrying because, my grandfather was no dummy. We were carrying all of the fish and the fishing equipment. I don't know how that happened, but he always seemed to manage to get out of carrying things. So we decided, my older brother and I, that we needed to cut short this hike back. So we stopped at this spot, and we could see down to the campground, and we just had to go down this gully. And it appeared that this gully went all the way to the bottom of Mount Joseph. I am here to tell you today it did. 3 hours later, we finished what would have been an hour-and-a-half hike. And my grandfather, if he were here today, would still gloat over taking the wrong path. It's really important for us as the church to be on the right path to where God has called us to be. And there are some questions about what that path looks like and where the path is leading us. But I can tell you what I'm seeing and where I think God is leading and calling us to do, and what I am seeing people in this church step up to do. Yesterday, there was a group of 7 of us who loaded up in this van, and I mean this van was loaded with food and blankets and water and people. Oh yeah, don't forget the 7 people in 6 seats, just so you know. There was no danger of us in a crash, of us falling out or flying out of the car. And we went down to the place we had gone before. And as John said in his prayer request, we fed somewhere around 30 people. We took them food, we took them water, we had some hand cleaning stuff, and we had blankets and a couple of sleeping mats, and we met some people. I am. So we got there, and these 30 people gathered around the van, and we met them. Lots of different people, lots of different stories, lots of different needs. But what I saw and what I heard was what I think God is calling us to do and be as the church. God is calling us as the church to feed His people. Not just food, because you all get it. Sometimes we need to be fed something other than food. We need to be fed the Word. We need to be fed encouragement. We need to be fed love. God's calling us to do that. We met these people exactly right where they were. We could go back there again today and they would still be there, a good number of them. We could go back there next week and a good number of them will still be there. And the church is called to feed them and to care about them and to love them. Because no matter who they are, they're not all that different from you and I. You see, one of the problems in the church is we oftentimes still continue to have this us and them mentality. We-uns inside are good, them-uns outside not so good. Those of us who know Jesus are blessed, but those who don't know Jesus, not blessed. Always gets dangerous because I'm not sure that the folks there didn't know Jesus. But they aren't like us, the folks there. Or maybe they are just like us, with a different address, with a different hurt, with a different angst, with a different temperament. Maybe they're just like us in a different place. Because when you talked to the folks that gathered around, what you heard was their story. Their stories of broken relationships with their families. Any of you ever have a broken relationship with your family? What you heard were people talking about their excessive depression to the point that they injure themselves. What you heard was about a husband and wife who gave up a warm bed because they couldn't take the persecution from a parent anymore. What you heard, and here's the important part, The fact is, we heard it. One of the stories that came out was that lots of people feed the hungry. They drive up in big white vans and throw food out and say, "Come and get it," and leave. We chose this place because we had been there once before and because we could actually sort of remember their names. And you know what? They remembered us because we spent time with them. We didn't just throw the food out and leave. We talked with them. We helped them build a tent. We helped them do the things that needed to be done because it was going to be 28 degrees last night. And under this bridge, the wind was howling. We met Annie. She was wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt and had something, I don't remember exactly what it was, wrapped around her neck. It might have been a scarf. She had no coat. But we had one, and we gave it to her. And she cried. Jesus has called us to be on that road. The road to making a difference. You see, this story about Peter getting out of the boat is really about our call to get out of the boat that's called the building at 203 South Main Street. Doesn't mean we're not going to come here and worship. We are. And we're going to have a great time doing it. But if all you do is come in for worship, it's not enough. If all you do is come in to be fed without going out to feed others, it's not enough. Now, it doesn't mean that you're all going to go down to the Carroll Street Bridge and meet the 30 people that we met. But we need some help being that church. We need more prayers. We need more food providers. We need more ice chests, maybe. We use ice chests to carry hot food, by the way. We need your support. Because that's how we're going to make a difference. And sometimes we're going to go to Dallas to do it, but other times we're going to do it right here. We had a men's meeting on Saturday where we decided that we were going to feed at least one family a month as a men's group. And that family's going to be local. That family's going to be maybe somebody some in this room know. We don't know who it's going to be yet. But if you know a family that's having trouble putting food on their table, we want to know about it. That's the pathway God has called His people to be on. To meet the needs of the people. To share God's love. You see, it was amazing. We stood around with these people and God kept coming up. It was kind of cool. These people weren't unbelievers necessarily. In Sunday school, somebody pointed out they might have stronger faith than some of us in the building. Peter looks out and sees Jesus out there and says, "If it really is you, Lord, tell me to come." This is where it gets really important for us to understand this story. Jesus says, "Well, come on." Do you think do you think that Peter was really excited about that last invitation? Come on, get out of the boat. I don't think so. I think he was sorry that he asked. I think ultimately he wished John had asked. You know, that disciple that Jesus really loved. Come on. So Peter gets out of the boat. And he's walking to Jesus. And he's walking. Now, I always wondered what the other disciples in the boat did while this was going on. Look at that. Who would have thought? Peter can walk on water. I think somebody shouted it and said, "Way to go, Peter!" And he turned around. And when he turned around, he noticed that the waves were as tall as him. And he noticed that the boat was back where the choir loft is. And he said to himself, "I can't do this." And he was right. And he sank. And in his panic, he turned back around and he said, "Lord, save me." And the good news is Jesus reached out his hand and lifted him up right there. Peter's back on the path. But I'm going to tell you the single most important thing about this whole story and about the whole message of yesterday and about the feeding of the people who are hungry and the meeting of the needs of the people in Duncanville and in, Cedar Hill and Dallas County and even in Oklahoma, is that we're on this path. And the only way we're going to make it, as Peter figured out, was that if he stayed on the path with Jesus. Because when he took his eyes off of Jesus, he sank. And if we take our eyes off of Jesus, it won't matter what we do. We'll sink. Just like Peter. Now, we're going to fail. We're going to do things that don't work out. But we're going to keep our eyes on Jesus. Because it was Jesus who reminded us when he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And that's the pathway we're called to be on. That's the pathway we're called to walk. And as long as we're walking with Jesus, then we're on the right road. Amen. Our